now. I have never been forced to sit in a chair before in my life and talk. So this is going to be a little bit new. But my purpose of these schools is so that when people come to your farm, when they try to sell you something, when you're doing something, that you have enough information to know what is right or what is based on sound science and what is maybe a great sales pitch. I want to say right up front, I am not currently working with any feed company, any mineral company, anything like that. I've done a bunch of consulting in the industry for a long time, but when I came to UGA, I quit all of those associations. I want to go over my first presentation tonight. I just want to talk about the beef industry because we're less than 2% of the population. And the reality of it is that many of our elected officials do not realize how important it is. When I hear people talk about the livestock industry and all of the harm we do, I just wonder if they've ever gone outside of the outer belt of the city to see all the small towns and what the economic impact of animal agriculture is. Now I will say this, y'all should have these in your packet. If you don't, there's no need to take a bunch of pictures. This all ought to be in your handouts. If they're not, we'll get them put in for next week. But I think, Tammy, this presentation is in there. So we go from over 700,000 independent beef operations, cow-calf, down to 4 major packers. My second talk tonight, I'm going to talk about grading and about pricing of cattle. But the reality of it is, as we go further down on this page, we use technology more and more. I mean, one of the things that Extension's been doing for 30, 40 years is trying to get people to castrate their calves before they sell them. There are huge segments of the industry that make a lot of money off of people who don't castrate their calves. And it's just things like that versus feedlots. When I end this school up, I'm going to show you programs. There are programs out there that every night, basically, I look at what pens of cattle that I'm feeding in South Dakota, Nebraska, and Iowa were fed that morning. And we have a 60-day record of that to track feed intake. So there's a lot of levels of technology in this industry. But I want you to look at this. If we look at all cattle and calves cash receipts in 2021, it was almost $66 billion. We're a big industry. And the reality of it is, this is one thing people kind of miss. The most prevalent organic compound on the face of the earth is cellulose. And if it weren't for ruminants taking that cellulose that's in those forages and converting it to high quality protein and high quality zinc and iron that's actually absorbable by humans, we would have a lot more human health issues than we do in the world. Protein energy malnutrition is the #1 thing that kills people in the world. And thank God for ruminants. If we look at beef exports, our value per head by the market, China was $97.7 million. Korea, 103.46. I'm sorry, this is per head, $103 per head. China, 97.71. Japan, $88. Variety of meats is a big thing. Exports are a big thing. I'm going to blow one myth out of the water that a lot of people get a misconception on. We absolutely need lean beef imports in this country. We rely on it because we export high quality, high value, highly marbled product. But what we also get with our average steer right now being 1,400 pounds, there's 150 pounds of fat trim for that animal that the packer has paid us for. Now here's a reality. Back in the 70s when we had 30 million more cows in this country, we had a lot more cull cows. We import lean meat to mix with our fat trim, our 50-50 trim, and our waste fat to create the hamburgers that you're buying when you go through and you eat at a McDonald's or a Burger King or a Wendy's, or you go shopping at a Kroger or a Publix. A lot of that imported lean actually adds value to our fat. We are not producing enough pounds, but what we because we don't have enough cull cows, but what we export is very high quality. Variety meats, the things that we don't normally consume, added $36 almost per carcass in 2022. $18 per carcass in tons, $7 in tripe. That's the reticulum washed and blanched. $4 in the liver, $2 in lips, $2 in hearts, $1.86 in tripe and intestines. So here's something that is very difficult for many people to really accept. The large-scale packing industry in the United States, to me at least, is not a bad thing, because we didn't used to have all of these exports. We didn't used to have the ability to gain $300, $400 in export value from our meat when there were a lot of small packers. Now, is it perfect? Absolutely not. Do the packers do price gouging like they did during COVID? Absolutely. Year in and year out, though, they actually add a lot of value to our industry. The other thing they do is, and I've worked with a lot of small packers in my life and continue to on helping them get set up, is that the reality of it is it creates a differentiated market for that small packer who wants to do regional foods, who wants to service that local need. But I'll show you in a few minutes why that gets really difficult from a pricing standpoint, a competitiveness standpoint. If we look, and the reason I show you this, I want these on your handouts so that you'll know where to go. There's something called the USDA byproduct drop value, and it's all this stuff, the hide, the tallow, the tongues, the cheek meat, the head meat, the oxtails. This is really where year in and year out the large packers make their money. These are the export items that you saw a couple slides ago. Well, why is that important? It's important to know that if you're working with someone who's setting up a small packing plant, they're not going to be paid for many of these things. They're going to have to pay a renderer to come and pick it up. And I've worked with 2 small all-natural programs, and what we have figured our dollar difference per head that we had to charge out of the meat was close to $250. So the reality of it is, if you have a 1,250 pound steer that dresses 62%, you're looking at about a 750 pound carcass. And then out of that 750 pound carcass, what you're really getting is 50% boneless trim retail cuts. And that would be a yield grade 3. So if you're getting 350, 375 pounds of product, saleable product, and you have to make up $200 to $250, you're looking across the board at 60 to 75 cents to make up in value what that animal is worth to the packer. Well, people aren't going to pay you normally that much more for your ground beef, so your strips and your loins and your ribs go up in price. So just understand that this system, the large system, and I'll show you some stuff here in a minute, actually is really good at feeding the people in this country. And there's room for all kinds of operations here. Total receipts, cattle and calves, 73 billion. Dairy, 42 billion. Hogs, 28 billion. Poultry and eggs, 46 billion. I do have to say, since moving to Georgia, I've never seen a part of the world that could have a chicken restaurant on nearly every corner and have a waiting line at noon. It's pretty impressive.
Rex,
Yes.
we got somebody in the waiting room that needs to get in. If you want to click on it.
Well, if I knew how to do that. Keith, if you want to come show me how to do that. Hey, I'm a beef cattle nutritionist, not a computer expert. You get the two gray-haired guys in the room working on technology.
Well, you depending on me for technology, yeah. Let's see. I don't, there it is, right there. There on my iPhone, yeah.
Okay,
Click that and admit,
alrighty.
and it should be joining.
This is not perfect. Okay. Some information on what our consumers actually eat. I think it's really important to understand that today, as much volume or as much dollars value of food is eaten away from home as at home. So there is a real reason that 60 to 70% of our carcass in this country goes into ground beef. Every Taco Bell, every Burger King, every McDonald's, every restaurant, those are meals away from home. What does this indicate? Folks, it indicates that we're an affluent country. If you're not an affluent country, you can't afford to do that. And so, from my standpoint, agriculture and a stable agriculture and a stable beef industry, it's part of national security. There are very few of us alive in this room who ever remember being hungry as an entire generation versus my parents. And so we really need to do a good job of explaining our role. Okay, total food at home, food away. Look how far we've come since 1961. Food at home was 14% of disposable income. Now it's 4.5% to 5%. If we look at a nominal food dollar by industry, farm production is only 7.4 cents of every food dollar out there. So the one thing you can look at this and you can say, well, we're not being paid enough for our product. You can look at it another way and explain to your neighbors and people who don't understand that 93 cents of every food dollar goes to providing jobs for the people who buy our products. And it really is why the U.S. food system is so critical, not only from a personal health standpoint, but from the standpoint of economics to the entire country. Sorry. So in 2018, Americans spent 9.7% of their disposable income on food at home, and away was 4.7%. We have come since 1960 to 1988 from going from 16.8 to 10.1%. And my next slide shows this a little bit differently. But since 1930, when 24% of the household income went for food, down to 9.4%, and with recent inflation a little bit, we're at 9.7 to 10. How does that relate to the rest of the world? Well, we relate very favorably there because of our cheap food policies. We also look at this and look at our calories, and we are the country with the most calories at the lowest percentage of household income. As I said before, protein, energy, malnutrition is the #1 killer of people worldwide. That's starvation. Okay, so we are really an advanced country. If you put this on and look at how much we spend, and this is from 2014, I really couldn't find a more recent graph. But I think if you look down, it might be difficult for you to read, but from the top, United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Germany, South Korea, Japan, France, Italy, Brazil, Greece, South Africa. And then you start getting down to where countries are spending more than 25% of their income on food. Saudi Arabia, China, India, Russia, Egypt, Ukraine, Pakistan, Cameroon, Nigeria. When you're spending half your household income on food, you're not going to buy cars, you're not going to buy televisions, your kids aren't going to have phones. You're trying to survive. So when I hear, this is my personal belief, but when I hear people say that we aren't a great country, I think they haven't traveled internationally a lot to see what real poverty is. If you travel and you work in agriculture in South America or Central America, you will see poverty like we can't even imagine here. Entire towns where there's not glass in the windows. Those people are trying to survive. We're very, very fortunate in this country. We're very fortunate in this country. This shows a different way of representing it, but the darker green areas, as it gets darker green, they spend a higher percentage of their household income on food. Why am I stressing this so much? We're the only country that has cooperative extension, formed in 1914. I think sometimes we may not realize it, but when we get visitors from other countries that are amazed at how we do production here, they don't benefit from having over 130 years of research at research institutions, land-grant institutions, or since 1914, having an extension service so that you can call your local extension educator and you can find out information to help you. When people come from other countries, they can't believe how open we are with our information, because in many places, knowledge is power on a different level. And keeping that power from the masses is a way to control them. We are very open here. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about, now I'm going to switch in what the beef industry does for the country, because I get really tired of reading how our cow farts are destroying the earth, okay? Depending on our definition that's used, 20 to 40% of the earth's land mass is grasslands that are grazed by ruminants. And here's one thing that people don't talk about. When carbon is sequestered by an actively growing grassland, it stays in the soil. When carbon is sequestered by a tree, the problem with trees is forest fires. Every time there's a forest fire, the carbon that may be stored in the wood or the leaves is released back into the atmosphere. And so a reality of it is we really need to understand that grasslands, actively growing grasslands, sequester carbon and keep it in the soil. And the only thing that uses actively growing grasslands are ruminants. And so we need to understand a little bit of that science. I also hear a lot, because I am a feedlot person for the last 30 years. And I hear a lot about how all of our corn just goes to beef cattle and how it's inefficient to be putting it through livestock. Well, 45% of our corn crop now goes into ethanol. And it has to, by law. And so the reality of it is, we need to know that with our ethanol production, last year it left 32 million tons of dry distillers grains. The beef industry used 14 million tons, the dairy industry 8 million tons, the swine industry 4.5 million tons, the broilers 2.8, layers 1.6 million tons. The reason the numbers are so high for beef and dairy compared to swine, broiler, and laying, they're using that for fiber and for protein, but the same way we would use it for fiber. It's not digested by the broilers and by the swine the way it is. It is fiber to keep their intestinal tract moving. The beef and dairy use it for energy and protein because they digest the cellulose that's in the distillers grains. So then I think about soybeans. We grow soybeans in this country for soy oil processing. Soy oil creates soybean meal and soy hulls. And each year the beef and dairy industry consume almost 3.8 million tons of soy hulls, and cattle eat 3.4 million tons of soybean meal. That's a lot. Chickens use about 20 million tons of soybean meal. Pigs use about 7 million. Nationwide, soybean meal is the most common protein supplement that we have in the livestock industries across the board. I want to reiterate that. Why do we have soybean meal? Because we're growing soybean for soy oil. These are byproducts. They are not the major products. So I want to talk a little bit now about greenhouse gases, because it just astounds me that we have so many news outlets that are talking about how horrible methane coming from ruminants is on the environment. And the data that I'm going to show comes from the EPA. 27% of greenhouse gases come from transportation, 25% from electric power, 24% from industrial production, 13% from residential and commercial sources, 11% from all of agriculture, including field crop, vegetable production, row crop production. However, beef and dairy cattle and all ruminants account for just 3.9% of all greenhouse gases produced in the United States. And what are the greenhouse gases that cattle produce? Carbon dioxide and methane. Okay, so let's look at our sources of methane in this country. In 2020, the EPA reported that 7% of greenhouse gas production was nitrous oxide and methane was 11%. However, what we don't hear on the news very often is that methane, first of all, comes from sources other than agriculture, such as transport of coal, natural gas, and oil industries, by decay of organic matter. So apparently methane from a swamp is a good thing because it's a swamp, and if it comes from a cow, it's a bad thing because it comes from a cow. I'm a little bit sarcastic about this because I don't like the misuse of science. And the reality of it is, what we really need to be worried about from greenhouse gas production is nitrous oxide and fluorinated gases. Because nitrous oxide is 265 times more potent than carbon dioxide, which is the baseline value of 1. That nitrous oxide that's coming from burning fuel in all of our tractors, all of our cars, all of our trucks, is 265 times more potent than carbon dioxide. But the real problem in this is fluorinated gases from refrigerants. They are 23,000 times more potent than carbon dioxide. And the lifetime of a fluorinated gas in the atmosphere is 10,000 years before it breaks down. And so if you look at the numbers that the EPA is reporting, the percentages, and you look at the actual potency of the gases as greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide has a CO2 equivalent of 1 because it is carbon dioxide. It's 0.001% of greenhouse gases. Methane is 28% of CO2. It's 11% of all production, but it only accounts for 0.424% of all greenhouse gases on a carbon dioxide equivalent, versus nitrous oxide, which is 2.55% on a carbon dioxide equivalent, and fluorinated gases are 97% of all greenhouse gases when we put them on a carbon dioxide basis. And that is the measurement of the strength of the gas as a greenhouse gas. So I have a message here. My message that I'd like everyone in this room to understand is that the U.S. has a very dynamic beef industry. It adds value to the entire supply chain and to the economy. We use grasses and byproducts of other industries to produce high-quality proteins for human consumption. Consumers in the United States eat almost an equal number of meals outside the home as they do at home, and we have the lowest cost of food on a household income percentage in the entire world. We are very affluent in that way and don't realize it. I think animal agriculture needs to be more assertive in explaining how our minimal impact on greenhouse gases has the benefit of providing people with a high protein food, and that really, it is civilization. It is increasing numbers of people with more cars that are using more fluorinated hydrocarbons that don't go away in the atmosphere. It's, as we move to 9 billion people in the world, it is people and our activities as society that cause these greenhouse gases. If you think I'm wrong, go to any major city on any morning at rush hour and smell the air quality versus going out into a pasture with cattle. And it's people, not cattle, that are the most dangerous to climate change. We have to accept our responsibility. We're all guilty. And that is the reality of this. If we're all in one society, we are part of it. And we are trying to pass the buck and blame cows. Now here's one little fact. In the 1840s, there were somewhere between 50 and 80 million bison in North America. There were as many bison in North America as there are beef cattle and dairy cattle now. Those bison didn't have great repro rates like we do on our farms. A higher percentage of the total number were mature adults. They're also ruminants. Ruminants eat about 2% of their body weight on a dry matter basis, whether it's a 1,250 or 1,400 pound cow or a 1,600 to 1,800 pound bison. Folks, the amount of methane being produced in North America now is not significantly different, not higher or lower significantly than it was in 1840. But people don't want to hear that because you can't fit it in to a 10-second Instagram post. I can't, Keith can't. We know we can't. But if your kids can, if they can learn these things, we have to get this stuff out because it's just scientific fact. I would be glad to take any questions. I see we have 3 on chat. Shoot, are we not sharing? Any questions here in the room about anything I've said? Okay, you're being really, really quiet. I hate to start calling on people, but I will. I'm not afraid of it. And I've never known Mike to be quiet in his life.
Dr. Fluharty,
Yes.
There you go.
go back to where the greenhouse has come from.
Yes, sir.
Right there, I think it's the one after soybean.
That one?
No, keep going. Go again. Be page 10. And in your handles, it'll be page 10. But go. Nope. That's
Slide.
it.
So I have them on slides, not pages. Tell me when to stop.
Go one more. And stop. All
Yep.
right, so there on the bottom, you're saying that beef and dairy contribute 3.9,
Yep.
but the UC Davis guy says that just 2% is from beef cattle.
Yep.
That's 2% of the 3.9?
It's 2% of the total. If you get 3.9% of all greenhouse gases come from beef and dairy, Frank's saying that 2% of the methane, because we eructate a lot of carbon dioxide out of the beef animal. That difference is carbon dioxide.
Okay.
Yeah. Which is the least impactful. It is the baseline of 1.
Gotcha. So the 3.9% is actually part of that 11% of all agriculture there on the top? Or?
Yep, it is. And the rest of it is, quite frankly, nitrous oxide and fluorocarbons. You know, here's the one thing, and I mean, we have to be realistic about this in agriculture. Anytime you run across a pasture and you clip a pasture, or you plant grass, or you run over the field and you're using gas. I think a lot of people forget that we have to maintain pastures. And the reality of it is there are expenses and there are fluorocarbons and there's nitrous oxide used in everything we do. But we probably as a group spent more in our gas tonight than all of the cows will for about a month. That's my reality. So I'm gonna take a quick pause here while we change presentations. It took us a little while to get going tonight, and I want y'all to break into me quietly. You're kind of being really quiet. I'm going to give one more presentation tonight, and then I'll save the third one I had planned on giving for next week, and just simply because we got a little bit late and I don't want everyone running home on me, like in 20 minutes or so.
You got it, Francis?
We'll find out.
Keith, I got one saying that it went out on Zoom. Can you check, make sure that it,
Yeah, he just
Once he
dropped
gets,
out. It should come back up.
okay. This is before he did that, so.
Okay.
Is it on your desktop?
Somebody's coming out in that treatment plant from the big city. Somebody dumping in the people. That's the problem, right?
We're sharing.
You can't even put in the creek on the street, even back here, it's wrong. So when they get it, everybody.
Yes, sir. I'm gonna let you have a second dessert to go. Thank you and say happy birthday.
He didn't never do it right.
Yeah, that's how I work.
About 2 hours. So they cut the whole field down over there, you don't do that. What it is, it's all yours, the way you gonna store it, then wrap it.